Hi. Today we're going to be talking about Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, which is a novel I really enjoyed, and I'll confess that I really enjoyed pretty much everything I've ever read by Gaiman. I think he's a great author. Neverwhere is on this list not just because I like it, but because I think it's a really, really good example of the sort of reinvented fantasy genre. Starting with Richard Mayhew as a heroic character. Richard Mayhew isn't very heroic. He's not particularly strong. He's not particularly bright. He's not particularly brave. He's sort of an everyman type figure. He's no Aragorn. He's certainly no Conan. But he tries to do the right thing, even with his limitations. And in that sense, he's just like every one of us. He's not even an Alice, sort of an innocent child wandering around the world. He's just someone who sort of wandered into this greater adventure that's going on and has to try to make a sense of it. We can also look at London Below as being quite significant. In most fantasy stories that we've looked at so far, the fantastic is someplace else. It's either in a mythical past, it's in another world, it's through a rabbit hole or a looking glass. London Below is all around us. And the idea is that the fantastic is all around us, and we occasionally catch little glimpses of it that we may even be able to remember the next day. So both of these trends are very, very significant in the evolution of fantasy literature, and we'll see them keep coming back. In other ways, Neverwhere is a very, very traditional fantasy story. You see a quest unfolding, you see fabulous monsters that must be overcome, you see treacherous villains, even though Krupp and Vandemar are very, very different than the sort of treacherous villains that we've seen in other stories. And you see Gaiman sort of picking up on this fantasy tradition, but modifying it for a more contemporary reader who has a different set of expectations. One of the more interesting, from a narrative standpoint, aspects of this novel comes in the fact that Mayhew is an outsider to this region. And if any of you have ever taken a short fiction writing class, you've probably been introduced to the idea of expositional dialogue. And expositional dialogue, exposition is where something is explained, and expositional dialogue is where you have two characters having a conversation, not so much for their own benefit as for the benefit of the reader or the audience. You know, like, remember that really bad science fiction movie you saw where there are two scientists and they're talking about some scientific principle? They don't really, as characters, need to have that conversation. But they need to make sure that you, as a viewer, know it. So the authors make those two characters have that conversation for your benefit. And it can be really, really distracting to a viewer who's sort of aware of that. By making Richard Mayhew an outsider to this region, it allows there to be an opportunity for characters, whether it's Dor, whether it's Hunter, whether it's the Marquis, to explain to him what's going on and why it's significant. And this sort of picks up on the tradition that Carroll established in Alice in Wonderland, which this book, in an ironic sort of way, draws a lot from. If you enjoyed this book, by the way, in addition to Gaiman's other works, most recently Stardust, you can find different movie adaptions and different television adaptions. And the television adaptation of Neverwhere was put out by the BBC and is kind of interesting to watch. The BBC always has sort of mixed production values, so you might enjoy taking a look at that. I'll see you next week.